Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about the Dallas Stars. Tom Gagliardi, owner of the Dallas Stars, bringing this into focus today. And I get the feeling he's probably not the only owner that feels this way. So I'm going to be fair to Tom on this one. There are likely other owners. I remember Brian Burke bristling against how contracts were changing. It was simple. You draft a player, you sign him to his entry level contract, which is capped at $925,000 a year currently. And so you've got them for 2 or 3 years, usually three. You usually sign them for the 3 year entry level contract. Then they come out of that entry level contract, and it didn't really matter how good they were, how much they were producing. They got what was called a bridge deal, which is your 2 or 3 year contract that gave you a raise over that 925,000, but you might get 2 million, you might get 3 million, and that kind of thing. We still see players getting bridge contracts, but usually it's going to be your lower paid player, third, fourth line player, maybe a guy who hasn't proven himself yet. What we call a show me contract, right? And for instance, Patrick Laine having done that a couple of times himself. Now, Dallas is in trouble, right? They have $10,335,834 in salary cap space. They're one of the few teams in the league that has that much cap space, but it's basically not there because they have to sign Jason Robertson, they have to sign Jake Ottinger. Now, Ottinger probably won't be that expensive in the end. I'm not worried about Ottinger and whether or not he'll hold out. I think it probably gets done. Robertson, based on what was said today by Tom Gagliardi, it does make me wonder. So he said in this interview that the Stars are taking all the money, which is something we basically called that when the salary cap came in. That the cutbacks for certain salaries would not be star players or top guys, unless you're in a situation like, say, Boston, where they'll sign for less money because they want to make sure the team stays competitive. Pittsburgh, we've seen that as well, right? And I think we're starting to see that with Colorado too. Players want to win, so it's really important to make your money while you're in your prime. But it's also important to win, so they kind of balance that out. And I think some teams have done that very, very well. Now, the other thing too that he said that's got some people scratching their heads, and because I've looked through the comments, the guys who put the puck in the net are getting too big a piece of the pie. I understand what he's saying here. I get it. But this is something that it's just how it works. When I do career videos and I look at guys who are maybe middling players, good players, but I look at a season where they get 40 goals or 50 goals, and that may be out of line with their normal output. And I think to myself, boy, if that was a contract year and it was now, they would have made probably 8 million a year if that was a contract year. And it is something I think about, and it is something that's different now from the way hockey was in the 80s or in the 90s, right? And another one that he said, a guy scores 40 goals. This is paraphrasing. Basically, a guy scores 40 goals, wants $7 million. Jason Robertson scored 41 goals last year. So that's as direct as I think it gets to Robertson. Now, I'm just going to say, if Robertson wants $7 million a year, give him $7 million a year. See how many years you can get for $7 million. I will negotiate this contract for the Dallas Stars and for Jim Nill. I'll do it. Just give me the phone. I'll do it. I'll get if all he wants is $7 million, you give him $7 million, because Robertson has done it 2 years in a row where he's looked fantastic, and Dallas needs that dynamic forward. And Ottinger, I don't think he's going to be looking for $7 million. If he is, and if they both got that, then Dallas has some cap problems. So I wanted to take a look at this because he's basically saying that, this is squeezing teams. This is not great. The top paid contract on the Dallas Stars is Tyler Seguin. $9.85 million is the cap hit for him until 2027. So there's 5 more years of this contract. In 81 games this past season, 24 goals, 25 assists, 49 points. Now, some attribute his drop in production to injury, to not being the same player he was prior to said injury. But the reality is that's still much, much too high of a cap hit for the output that they're getting from Seguin. It is unlikely that Seguin gets back to point per game or near point per game. That being said, he's still young enough to bounce back. And then you have Jamie Benn, $9.5 million until 2025. And this is a contract that is not aging particularly well. 82 games, 18 goals, 28 assists, 46 points. So that is $19 million in cap between Sagan and Benn. That's over 20% of your cap space going towards two guys who you're not getting enough production from. And this is something I've talked about with Dallas many, many times over. And to the point of it almost being a meme. But Robertson, here's my point of view on this now, and it has changed. I used to basically say, look, these guys should just take the bridge contract. That's how it's done. But yeah, the game has changed, and so has contracts. Robertson, at this point, being on the sidelines and them not wanting to pay him, I think is at least in some way tied to the fact that they've got so much cap with Sagan and Benn. If Sagan and Benn were costing them $3 million less per season, I think Robertson's signed right now. Now, that's just, speculation on my part, sure. But it really goes to the idea that Jim Nill's had some contracts that have been head scratchers. He's had trades that have been head scratchers. I still remember when they had Niemi and Lettinen, and my reaction being, wait, we went from one, maybe 1B starter to having two 1B starters? How's this going to work? And it really didn't. So Pavelski is next on the list. Pavelski's cap hits $5.5 million for a year. I don't think there's going to be any problem with Pavelski's contract. That's a fantastic cap hit. And again, if Benn was around that cap hit, I don't think there'd be nearly the amount of speculation and scrutiny with that contract. 82 games for Pavelski, 27 goals, 54 assists, 81 points. So that production and that cap hit are good. Even if Pavelski falls back a bit this year, maybe gets 65 points. For $5.5 million, I think he takes 65 points. Mason Marchment, $4.5 million until 2026. There's some risk to this contract. We don't know that he necessarily produces as well with Dallas as he did last year for Florida. In 54 games, 18 goals, 29 assists, 47 points. I am perfectly signed with them getting Marchment signed. The one thing that to me, again, just from a perspective of as a GM and just, the whole armchair GMing thing, is that so you've got a major player in Jason Robertson that you want to get signed. You need to get signed, right? I think it's important to make sure that's done first, I think, before you start messing around with the rest of the lineup. But again, that's me. And if they're nowhere near with Robertson, then you don't want to miss out on Marchment. Radek Faksa, $3.25 million until 2025. He had a down year goal scoring wise. He only had 5 goals to go with 14 assists in 77 games. But Faksa is one of these guys that it feels like Gaglardi's pointing to. He doesn't put the puck in the back of the net. He said basically there's a lot of guys making $1 million in the NHL right now because there's not enough money to go around. But Fox's cap hits $3.25 million. That's healthy. Rope Hintz, $3.15 million for another year. And again, looking at the Robertson contract negotiations where we are, with Hintz it might be, I'm not going to say worse, but who knows. In 80 games this past season, 37 goals, 35 assists, 72 points. That $3.15 million, I'm going to go ahead and say you can easily double it next year. And Dallas is going to be in a position, I would think, next summer where they really need to get rid of one of the expensive contracts. And which one they're going to get rid of, we shall see. If Dallas is going to build themselves to be a perennial playoff team and or a contender, this is something that needs to be handled. And it's something that Colorado's very good at. Tampa Bay's been good at. I know people don't like how Tampa Bay has worked around the cap, but you have to be able to either work around the cap or keep yourself under the cap. As Colorado has done for the most part, and you need to be able to make that work. And so Dallas is going to have some decisions to make. One of them might be Denis Gurianov, who makes $2.9 million under the cap. He's a restricted free agent next summer as well. In 73 games, he had 11 goals and 20 assists, 31 points. For Gurianov, I think he can easily double that goal total. But again, $2.9 million, there's not a lot of risk. But maybe, and again, speculation on my part, maybe if Gurianov has another 11-goal season, you don't qualify him for the simple fact that then he goes to market. You don't have to worry about the qualifying offer. You can negotiate him down because Hintz is the guy you have to keep, right? Glenn Dennings signed for another year at $1.5 million, 9 goals, 7 assists for him in 82 games. Yoel Kiviranta, $1.05 million in 56 games this past season. He had a goal and 6 assists. So rough year for Kiviranta, but he makes just a little over $1 million, so that's not too bad. Then you have Jacob Peterson, who's a restricted free agent next summer. $842,500 is his cap hit in 65 games, 12 goals, 5 assists, 17 points. Peterson might be due a raise too, but I don't think it'll be anything crazy. Studenic is signed for another year at league minimum, and so he had 33 games played, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. Now, the guys with the green asterisks here are 25 and under. So you've got Hintz, Gurianov, Peterson, Studenic, and Robertson, all 25 and under in that forward group. And I like the mix of this forward group, but again, the cap hits are what throw things off, and I think that's what keeps Robertson out. Now, when we look at the blue line, things are pretty stable there. You got Miro Heiskanen, $8.45 million cap hit till 2029. The cap hit may look high right now. By the time we reach 2026, 2027, that cap hit's going to look fine. 70 games, 5 goals, 31 assists, 36 points. I think the Stars would like some more points from Heiskanen, but he's still an excellent defenseman. Then you got Esa Lindell, $5.8 million until 2025. 76 games, 4 goals, 21 assists, 25 points. Ryan Suter, it's a contract that's a bit of a head-scratcher, $3.65 million till 2025. But I thought he played well for Dallas in 82 games, 7 goals, 25 assists, 32 points. Colin Miller's been brought in, $1.85 million until 2024. In 38 games this past season, he had 2 goals and 12 assists. Jani Hakanpää, $1.5 million until 2024. 80 games played, 4 goals, 8 assists for 12 points. And then rounding out the top 6, because I only did 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, and 2 goaltenders, Thomas Harley, $863,000 till 2024, and he'll be a restricted free agent at the end of that. In 34 games, he had a goal and 3 assists. Look for Harley to get a more expanded role. So the blue line, you don't have any contracts coming up. I guess they could look to move Suter's cap hit next summer. And again, just looking forward to next summer because you're going to have to pay Hintz. And the speculation is that the cap hit, like the salary cap around the league, will go up again next summer, but probably only by $1 million, which doesn't help teams that much. Wedgwood makes $1 million till 2024, so he signed a 2-year deal. 910 save percentage for him this past season. Ottinger at a 914, which is good. And Ottinger was good, not fantastic during the regular season. He was fantastic in the first round against Calgary, but can that carry over? So one thing that I would imagine there might be a couple of owners are saying wouldn't just be a guy scores 40 goals, wants $7 million. Might be goalie has a really good month. All of a sudden he wants to make X amount of dollars. But I understand it from a player's perspective. So here's the difference between the way the contracts were and the way the contracts are. The way contracts were, hey, Jason Robertson, you had a great season. You're coming out of your entry-level contract. We think you're fantastic. Here's a 2-year deal, $4 million per season. You can get back to us in 2 years and we can look at giving you that big long-term extension. But nowadays, it is Robertson looks at this score, at these overall stats and says, I scored more goals than Hintz. I scored way more than Sagan, and I more than doubled the goal total of Ben. So for him to go out there and say, you know what, Ben's making $9.5 million, I want 7, using 7 because that's the number that Gagliardi quoted in the interview, and I can't find any reason why Robertson shouldn't get the money. And I think in today's contract era, yeah, he deserves to get paid. And while, yeah, it sucks that the Stars won't have cap space once they get Ottinger and Robertson signed. If Robertson costs $7 and $7.5 million, Ottinger costs $3.5 million, their salary cap space just isn't there. But again, that's not really for Robertson to be concerned with. Like, people complain that players are too greedy and, oh, my team's over the cap because that guy was greedy. Players want to get paid what they feel is fair market value. And so they and their agents come up with what they believe is a fair number. Teams will counter, and then the negotiations go from there. Robertson, I think, is worth the money. He is the most dynamic forward that Dallas has. I think that if without Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski having a fantastic year together, Dallas doesn't make the playoffs. So the playoff gates that I'm sure Gagliardi was quite happy to get in the playoffs, I'm sure he was happy about getting a little bit of playoff revenue in Dallas, because there's times where you look around Dallas and their arena and you think, that looks kind of half empty, doesn't it? So I'm sure he enjoyed having that playoff revenue. But without Robertson, I don't think he gets it. So part of what Robertson can argue as well is, hey, you guys got to the playoffs. The team made that amount of money in said playoffs in part because of what I did for the team. Because if you take Robertson off that line, who would replace him on the line with Hintz and Pavelski? And who could replace him who would be anywhere near as successful, right? Because it's not just a matter of, well, we can plug this player in there, but how effective will he be, and will it change the way that line works? The answer is probably yes. So it sounds to me like the Dallas Stars are not close to a deal with Robertson. That can change. That can change overnight. But it is troubling that we're a couple of weeks out from training camp and we have an owner saying, I think the kids right now get too much money. Goal scorers get too much money. We need to start, thinking about some of the little guys. There's an argument to be made there. I do think that there are shutdown forwards in the league who are underpaid. I think there are players who become unrestricted free agents who would have gotten signed before the salary cap era easily, who don't now because teams get squeezed by the cap. It's really of their own making, though. Like, it's one thing that I've always thought was weird is that the NHL will go to the NHLPA when it comes to money matters, and basically what they're asking the PA to do, and the reason we have a salary cap is because GMs couldn't control themselves or something. It was, well, salaries are out of control. Don't you guys set that? So while I understand what the cap does and I support the salary cap, I can totally understand why players, when owners were trying to bring it in, were scratching their heads and saying, well, wait, you guys signed the checks. Why are you guys signing checks that you can't afford to sign? Wouldn't it make more sense not to do that? And in the end, the players kind of save the GMs from themselves because they'll do that. If you don't have a salary cap, yeah, Robertson probably gets 8 or 9 million, but Ben probably would have got 10 or 11. So would Sagan. That's the world we were living in before the salary cap. Some teams can afford to do that, most can't. So that's where we're at, and I don't think we're ever going to see a time where the salary cap goes away. And so for Robertson, he's the one getting squeezed. So we can talk about veteran players getting squeezed and players who are checking forwards not getting enough money. But right now, Robertson doesn't have a contract. And if that continues for much longer, he won't be in training camp. If he's not in training camp, he's not getting ready for the season. And if it extends into the regular season, we have seen in previous instances, sometimes players can just jump right in and pick up where they left off. A lot of them can't. So you may see him get off to a bit of a slow start. And then that can make things worse because then you might have an owner. Gaglardi's been very outspoken about both Ben and Sagan and how they're not producing. So if Robertson signed a contract in, say, middle of October and he takes a while to get up to speed, he could be out there saying, see, this kid got this money and I don't know. You see the way he's playing right now? Well, at least he got his money. So it's a tough situation all around. I do hope Dallas figures this out. I really do, because I think there's a good team here. Yes, Ben and Sagan's contracts are too high. They're too long. And odds are Dallas is going to have to work their way around it for a while longer. But, we will see what ends up happening. By next summer, maybe Ben's contract is easier to buy out, right? Worst case scenario, you got to buy him out and you got a bunch of dead cap for a while. But again, that might be where they end up. We'll see what they do. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. In fact, how much do you think Robertson's worth right now? Again, if he's asking $7 million, you give him $7 million. He had 41 goals. You give him $7 million. Well, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.